So we get out there, and the first thing I said was that I wanted an attorney, and they rolled up like 5 cars deep. And I'm like, dude, I've never been arrested. I have no priors for anything ever. So it was kind of like shock. Mm-hmm. You know, I was like, do I deserve? Am I a threat to fuck it? Because I didn't view myself. I was absolutely a threat to society, but I didn't view myself as that because it wasn't intentional.
I'm a former Detroit police officer and rode with the 1%er motorcycle club. During that time, I was involved in a lot of altercations. I had a gun shoved in my face. The trigger was pulled, and I got a plate under my left eye. I'm Manny Vitale, and this is my story. How you doing, everybody? I'm Manny Vitale, host of My Fight, Our War, and we are joined with Ginjer Wulff.
Hey, guys.
Ginjer, first of all, Little Red Riding Hood, I will never look at the same way.
And so I'm the Little Red Wolf, like my Instagram handle.
The Little Red Wolf, and it just so happens, My Fight, Our War, that's us, the wolf, so this was meant to be.
It was meant to be.
But thank you so much for coming on, and I know we were chit-chatting a little bit, and seeing some of your episodes, what you, the power and intensity, it's like, man, I got to have her on. So thank you for that. And, you know, we were talking about, there's so many different, it's like, what do you want to talk about first? You know, we could go here. We could go in so many different directions, man, but let's just go with, you know, from the beginning with you. Like, I still love that family tree, how you, that the way you put that. Mm-hmm. So let's just, like, you know, how it was growing up, you know, where you're from, where you grew up, and then how it went right in through the family dynamic.
So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Ginjer Wulff. You know, I've had a really interesting life. I grew up in St. Augustine, Florida. I was the youngest of 3 children. I was the only person in my family to, like, graduate high school. Had parents and basically everyone in my family that had trauma and a lot of stuff that they never worked through. And, you know, you and I were touching on it. But if you guys ever want to really mess your head up, do a family tree, but with trauma. It's literally where you list everyone in your family like a family tree, and then you start going through trauma. So my great-grandfather was a prisoner of war. He was a bomber, a pilot, and was shot down on D-Day. And he was in a Romanian prison camp for 9 months. My father was a preemie. He was bullied severely and almost didn't make it even as a baby. My mother was severely abused by her own father and was, you know, married off to somebody at 15 who beat her and then left her. And then she found my dad, and they got together and created our family system. It's really interesting, though, because it allows me to take my foot off of my own neck and the neck of the people who loved me, even if they weren't able to love me the way I needed them to love me. Does that make sense?
It's almost like you could understand it more once you went. I still love that, the way you put that with the family tree of trauma, because it does make so much more sense.
It does.
I mean,
it's a lot easier to be less angry, to be like, well, this happened to them and they never got treatment, and then to see how it trickles down through the family system and it affects the whole family society. I was bullied by my own family, and my dad was, like, really thin, I think because he was a preemie. He had big, goofy glasses as a kid, so I think he had, like, a thing against fat. And we moved from one location to another, and we moved, and I was an intellectual kid. I liked dolls. The kids down the road were all related, and they all were, like, hunting kids, even the girls. They, like, go skin animals, and, like, I was like, no! Not the bunny! Yeah.
Anything but the bunny.
Not the bunny! So I didn't really fit in. So my escape really was books and my grandmother. My grandmother would take me to the public library. I'd check out 10 books and have them all read within the weekend and be ready for new ones. But my father, I think because of his contempt with being overweight, because of his own self-image, I watched him, like, verbally abuse my mom growing up, and then he and my brother started calling me Fatty G. Growing up, it's like a horrible stripper name, bro. Next on stage in the ghetto is Fatty G. Fuck. And they used it. It was so prevalent that kids in the neighborhood thought it was acceptable to call me that because my family would call me that.
How old was that when that
I was
started?
probably 10.
Oh, man, especially that age.
Yeah, so I developed an eating disorder by, like, 13. Lost a bunch of weight my 8th grade year, and then I noticed my family treated me differently. So it definitely was like a core memory of my worth is directly correlated to how attractive I am. So that's something that's kind of heavy for a young girl. We didn't have social media then though, so I think it would have been even more difficult for me had we had social media, because again, comparison is the thief of joy. So if I'm always looking at others and know that my own family believes I am lacking and I am not enough, then I can only imagine how that would have made me feel.
Oh God, social media. It's like the saving grace and the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
And it's like, it goes from that to that. So man, I hear you.
Yeah, for sure. But I was a great student. I got all the validation in school that I never got at home. I was an honor student, gifted programs. I did AP and dual enrollment in high school. Had a really high ASVAB score. I did ROTC. The military wanted me. It was interesting. I started smoking pot when I was like 14 with the neighbor kids because my dad and my brother used to do it. And I always kind of felt like ostracized and like left out in my own family. It was always very much my family, don't tell Ginjer, because my brothers were 6 and 7 years older than me.
I was just
so yeah, so like, oh, Ginger's going to be upset if she knows that we're doing, don't tell her. So then I was always left out and like made an outcast in my own family. So school was great for me. And I worked a lot. I got a job, and my first job was in 8th grade. I worked at one pizza place serving tables for a family friend. And then by the time I hit my freshman year of high school, I took a job at Domino's. And my friend of mine got me the job there. Mm-hmm. And the manager was a creep. He was like 32. I was like 15. And he would come up to the girls and like grab us, and like while we're on the phone with customers and people are in, it was like he never tried to hide it because he kept getting away with it. But eventually I had an experience where he told me he was going to take me home, and then on the way home he's like, oh, have you ever been to a club, this club Evolution, we could go, I could get you in. I was like, oh, that sounds like fun. So I was like, At
15.
At 15.
And he was 32.
Yeah. And the math didn't math for me, right? Because I hung out with my brother's friends who were all older, but they weren't 32. My brother, I was 15, so my brother would have been, 21. But I would hang out with him and his friends, like, at the house while they were, like, I was in where I lived, and they were, like, smoking pot or doing whatever they were doing. So I think part of it was, like, almost a little bit flattered that he felt I was mature enough to like be able to be in that situation.
Kind of justified.
So I was like, well, I gotta go home. I'm in my work uniform, and like we get to the house, and I was kind of thinking he would just like leave after me being there forever. He ended up coming to the door, and like I forgot what he said and who answered the door, but like my mom came upstairs and was like, oh, your ride's outside. You're supposed to go somewhere, and I'm like, oh yeah. So I go downstairs, and like I said, it's weird even talking about, because part of me was like, oh, this is exciting. The other part of me was like, I don't know.
But you're 15.
Yeah. So I go, and he gives me some drugs and some drink, and then the last thing I remember is blacking out in the car, and then I wake up and like we're at his house, and I'm like naked, and he's on top of me. Basically, I mean, I'm gonna say raped because I was 15, he was 32, and he gave me drugs, and there was no conversation. There was no, hey, how's it going? You want to go bang one out? There was none of that. So it really messed with me, because I was like, I must have done something. I must have said something. It must have been something I wore, or there was something wrong with me that made this situation happen. So I'm just gonna avoid being me and I did. I kind of drowned myself in drugs for a little bit. I say up and down all the time that pot saved my life, because I was eating ecstasy after that experience happened. My friend that worked with me, her mom worked few jobs. They were like super poor, and there was always drugs at her house. Like it was literally the party house from the Friday afternoon to like Sunday evening. But there was a point where, like, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks in, we rolled like every week eating ecstasy, and I was like in school on Monday. I was like, bro, my brain just doesn't feel right. Like, I can't sit still. Like I feel like I can't. Like a thought is trying to go this way and connect to the other side of the brain, and it's just whoop into like a loophole. Like it was not where it was at for me. So I was like, I got to stop doing this. And I started just going to work and staying home and smoking pot. Eventually, I quit that job. I went into a different line of work, and it was better because, like, I didn't have the stress of having to work with somebody who had made me feel very confused about myself, never mind how I felt about him. And the public perception of me, because as soon as it happened, he told everybody in the store that he took me to a club and had sex with me. And then he ended up, they came in for like, somebody had said something to somebody, and the owner found out, and the owner had called my mom at one point and was like, hey, I heard your daughter's having some issues where she was physically assaulted by the manager, the general manager here. What do you want us to do? My mom's like, I just want it to go away. So I was like, okay, well, I'm not even worth a conversation. Mind you, my mom was like molested by her.
After this happened,
he kept his job.
But
he told everybody. People, it was crazy because I was a virgin before that. That was my first sexual experience with a man.
So here, usually it's a lot of times something like that. It's like, you come out and you're telling people what happened. And
he told them he was so proud of himself.
But usually it's just the opposite, and then you're the victim twice because they're like, "No, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. You're lying." Or what did you do and all that other shit?
Yeah. So everybody
actually
believed him, and everybody thought that like I was just the store tramp, I guess. And it was really hard for me because I was like, dude, I'd never. Like, I just got skinny. I ain't even had a chance to get a boyfriend. You know what I mean? Like,
took that from you.
Yeah. And again, I felt like it was my fault. Because I went, and then I didn't say anything because my mom was like, well, I want it to go away, and people were talking horribly about me, so I'm just like, well, fuck, I just want it to go away too. I don't want to talk about it because there's no way for me to tell you that this happened without people looking at me like there's something fucking wrong with me, and I guess there is. That was kind of my stance on it. He ended up getting a promotion. They promoted him to a beach store. And I like shortly after that, I quit. It wasn't that long.
Man, after something like that, when you're coming out, basically admitting you're having sex with a minor, did law enforcement somehow to get involved?
He had gotten away with it so many times. It was messed up too because right after that incident, I'd already had one friend working there, and right after that incident, two of my other friends were like, we live close to there, get us a job. It's gravy over there. Like, you've got easy hours. And in my mind, I was like, it was kind of twofold. It was like, okay, well, my friends are going to be there because my other friend had left. So my friends will be there and like, we'll watch out for each other. And he's not going to do it to them because there's something wrong with me. That's why he picked me out of everybody in the store, was because there's something wrong with me, and something I did or said gave him the impression that that was what I wanted. And that stuck with me until I talked about it on the first podcast with Ian. Because I never really told anybody. I told my best friend and then my husband at the time.
So when you said you talked to your mom about that, when your mom found out, I mean, how did that conversation even go? I mean,
she didn't ask any questions after the phone call. My dad, I don't know if I even talked to Ian about this. I can't remember. But like a few days later, my dad I'm coming home from work, and my dad's sitting on the couch, and he's bonging out like he always does. And he goes, oh, Mom says you're having some type of trouble with some guy at work. And I was like, yeah, he won't stop touching me, won't leave me alone. And he's like, well, how old is the guy? And I was like, well, he's in his 30s. And he was like, oh. That was it. That was it. That was like the whole so I was like, all right, cool. So it's my fault because nobody cares. Like, man, it wasn't even worth a real conversation to ask, well, what happened? Like, why did somebody else call me and tell us? It had to have been pretty bad if the owner of the store called, right? Because you're basically admitting liability.
Exactly.
But I kind of felt like, I don't know. Like, my parents just didn't care. And I think the reality is they were so focused on their own stuff. They didn't have the capacity to admit that they should have done something, or maybe the better way to have handled this to prevent other people from having it happen would have been to like file a police report, lodge a formal complaint. And those weren't things that I was thinking of. I do remember later on I had said something to my dad about like, I think we should say something to somebody, but like I didn't know who to talk to because the owner already knew. And he's like, oh, well, if you do, then you have to go to trial, and they're going to ask about like what you wear and who you hang out with, and do you do drugs, and you smoke pot. And I was like, all right.
So you were getting no support from family.
That's a recurring theme.
From nothing.
Even to this day.
Man, that's Ginjer, man. That's just...
I think they were heavily wrapped up with my brother. My brother was on oxys at the time. And my mom was very, like, codependent. I'm going to save him. And it really only made it worse because they would, like, run him to his dope dealer and, like, everything you're not supposed to do with the addict. They did because they didn't know or they didn't have the capacity to not engage in that way, if that makes sense.
Oh,
to this day, we argue about the way to handle that situation because that is still an
definitely.
active situation, too.
That is just insane, man. And because I saw that episode with you and Ian, and those were so, just so powerful, man. At that age, that you were thinking that, what did I do, and how is this my fault?
Where's the liability on me? Because
now,
I didn't say something now, and I didn't know at the time, right? So I leave the job. My friends stay behind. I find out, like, years later that my friend had the same exact experience with the guy where he basically took advantage of her being alone, offered her something he thought she would want, and then she found herself in this situation where, like, he's having sex with her. And so I held that with me for a long time, and thank God for Ian's show because she actually saw it. We were friends, like, still on Facebook, but it was kind of like she's in another area, I'm over here, we're doing different things. And we had never really talked about it other than her telling me that it had happened. So it was nice because she saw it and she reached out and she was like, dude, that wasn't on you. Like, it was just as much on you as it was on me, and that's neither is the case.
Well, you know damn well word is on his ass, Yeah. But the thing is, again, keep going back to the 15 years old and trying to comprehend what's going on. But what really is, tough too, man, is, you count on family for support, and especially your parents, man. So, I mean, that... just to deal with that, could take you into so many different directions. I mean, so after all that happened, man, at that young of age, and dealing with that, how did that affect from that going on?
So I touched on, I started smoking pot after work, and I would get hungry because, like I said, I was anorexic for a while. I lost like 60 pounds in a school year. Was very focused on the way I looked because I didn't realize how much I actually needed to heal emotionally. But I would go home at night and smoke pot while doing my homework or watching Family Guy, and then I would get hungry and I'd eat. So I got to a point where I was able to maintain a healthy weight, and I started getting into, like, weightlifting and, like, cross-country running and things of that nature. And then I started hanging out with different people at school. I started hanging out with the ROTC kids who were lots of fun and were crazy, but not drugs crazy, That was great. My life looked really good and very promising. I had a full ride scholarship that I knew was coming to me for anywhere in the state of Florida. I had a high ASVAB, a high ACT, a high SAT. So I could have went anywhere. I had a 4.2 weighted GPA when I started my senior year. But I had a heat stroke the summer at, like, Army Fun Camp the summer before my senior year. And that's actually what precluded me getting hooked on opiates, hooked on OxyContin. And so looking back on it, right, I think it was a combination of factors. I think it was the physical stroke that I had and cooped with the trauma of the things in the family dynamic and what had happened to me physically at my job. And after... it was like a floodgate opened. So I started having these horrible panic attacks and I couldn't breathe. And then it would evolve into where I was throwing up, and it would last for like a week to the point where, like, I would go into mild kidney and liver failure, and my parents didn't have insurance. So they would wait till I was so sick I couldn't really stand to take me to the hospital because they didn't want the bill. And then they were telling me at 17 that I was responsible for my bills, even though legally I wasn't. But they were telling me I was. And I remember my mom coming to me when I was like 18 and telling me, hey, I'm tired of these people calling the house for bills. You really need to do something about it. You should talk to your brother and get Tammy to take you to work at the strip club. fucking 18. Like, and my mom, bro. Like,
So all these things you just kind of flew by here, man, with what you dealt with drugs, with the sexual abuse, with the no support from family and friends at such a young age. And then on your own, you're turning this shit around by, going to a different group of friends, doing this ROTC.
Hyper independence.
So you got that right there as far as validation, man.
Yeah.
That my dad didn't, hey, Ginjer, great job, Dave.
I got friends whose dad would have killed that fucking guy if they had just seen the way that dude looked at me. Now,
yeah,
you know what
man,
I mean?
But you did all that on your own. After all that, just to shows how strong you are. Which is incredible, man, to go through all that, but then to do, as far as your grades and the colleges and all that, that's with no support except for Ginjer.
Well, I mean, I had friends support.
Well, no, but
yeah.
kind of like the family dynamic and all that.
For
So,
sure.
man, that says a lot about
my grandmother was a huge support for me, but, like, I couldn't talk to her about what happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, but
No, you're good, yeah.
But man, just hearing, this course of events, man. A lot of people, that spiral would have just kept going faster and then further just downward. But you, on your own, man, you stopped it, and then you got
slowed
control.
it down.
You slowed it down. But just to go from that to where you went, man, it's awesome. So then, like you said, you got to the point with the colleges and all that stuff is where we left off. So how'd that after that? Then?
So I ended up, I was accepted to FSU. I went out there for a few days and immediately unenrolled because my brother got arrested and my dad was like making a big deal about it because my brother had 2 kids. He's like, you know how much money it costs to raise 2 kids? We're going to be stuck with them and they were. But I came home because I felt I should help my family. And then I enrolled in the University of North Florida in Jacksonville, and I kind of breezed over. So that was later. That was after I graduated. I graduated 2005, but in 2004, that's when I was a senior, right? So my senior year of high school, we were only in school like 155 days or something because it was Hurricane Jean came through. It was the year of Katrina too, I think, or close to it. But we had a hurricane come through, so we missed some days. But I missed like over 130 days of school that year, and they couldn't keep me from graduating because I had so many credits, and I had already had a scholarship. You know what I mean? So I kind of skirted by, but I woke up on my 18th birthday with my first day of withdrawal. Because basically what was happening was I would have these episodes, right, where I couldn't breathe, I was vomiting, it wouldn't stop, I had horrible stomach pains, like I couldn't stand up straight. And my parents would like wait till I was really, really, really sick. They'd bring me to the emergency room, and the emergency room's goal is to make you so you can get out of there, make you so you're no longer like in danger of not being able to survive. So and by the time I would get in there, I'd be so like amped up because I've been sick for so long, and like I'm physically shaking and I can't function. So it was easier to deal with me by giving me pain meds. And I believe they thought they were doing the right thing for me. This is, mind you, too, this is different. This was in 2004 when Oxycontin was like the holy grail of pain management medication. They had Oxycontin for children at this point because they said it was so effective and non-addictive. And, it got to the point where, like, I would go in the emergency room and they'd hook me up with a bunch of nausea medicine, some Dilaudid or some fentanyl in my arm, or they'd send me home with Lortabs or Percocets. Sometimes they'd give me Oxy while I was in there. And then as soon as I hit 18, they referred me to pain management. And then by the time I was 21, I was doing, like, the pill mill pain management. So, right? So it definitely went from something that was like somewhat could be considered medical therapeutic to 100% recreational junkie stunt type of vibe.
So you ended up doing some doctor shopping back into stuff too, man.
Yeah.
You were doing all that stuff, this doctor, that doctor, and everything else.
Some days I'd go to Orlando, hit 2 doctors in one day. Every doctor I had gave me the full legal limit. So I'd get like 150 Oxy 30s, 150 Oxy 15s, 90 Somas, 90 Xanny bars, and then 90 Adderall 30s. And I'd go home and get rid of everything but the Oxy and keep as many Oxys as I could afford to keep. And
do inventory.
Yeah. Well, what was crazy was by the time I would go to a doctor, I'd get on that, and within a few days, the shit would be gone. It became so bad, I never had any money. I would always have to have somebody sponsor me to go to the fucking doctor. And then, you know, I'm doing 10 pills at a time, you know what I mean, trying to manage, you know, not being dope sick, and I'm doing them 3 times a day. So I'm doing 900 to 1,000 milligrams of oxy a day to be normal. You know, never mind like catch a buzz.
Yeah, just to stay.
Yeah.
You know, even keel.
And then this is by like 2009, end of 2009, and I kind of skipped over something too. So let's go back. So I was in college. I want to say 2006, and then I dropped out because I couldn't. I was kind of like tinkering with pills still, where I was taking them kind of like the way they were supposed to be. Some days I'd take 2 at once instead, but I wasn't like snorting them or shooting them or any of those things. Wasn't selling them. I had some stuff happen, and I think, again, just not healing and growing. And then, too, having to admit that I was a failure because everyone in my family expected me to go to college, and I was going to be the only one who made it, and then I didn't, you know? So it was tough to just look at my life and see that I was the main problem within my life. I couldn't see it at that point in time. But I met somebody that I worked with, and I had a baby in 2009, and within almost immediately, I knew I was not able to function properly as a mother. I was basically alone, even in the relationship that I was in. I was with the kid all day and all night because the guy as soon as I had the baby, literally like within 3 days, he signed up to start school. So he would do school from 8 a.m. to like 1:30, 2:30, and then he would come home for 30 minutes and would go work at the hospital from 3 to 11. And then when he came home at 11:30, he would go to the bar with his friends. And sometimes he would even ask me and the baby to leave at like 2 in the morning and take a cab to my mom's because I didn't have a car then because they wanted to party all night. Wow. So I didn't have any support there either. And again, these are situations that like I'm choosing to be in for whatever reason. For a long time, I thought he was going to be the best person I could ever get. I guess because I was sick a lot, like I didn't feel well a lot, and I knew I was like battling with some type of addiction. I'd started Suboxone right before I got pregnant, and then was pregnant and on Suboxone the whole time. And then within like a couple months after having the baby, I was sick the whole time. Like I lost 30 pounds while I was pregnant. Most women gain 30 pounds. Yeah, I lost 30 pounds. I could see my bones. It looked like I was smoking crack, which I've never done. Dude, can you imagine me on crack? I probably would never move. I'd just be
you look out the window and stuff. What's going on?
Yeah.
That's just... And then was he supportive at all during these times when you're sick and all that stuff going on, taking care of a kid?
Not really. I mean, like if the kid was crying and like it went on long enough, and Ginjer, take care of it, and I couldn't, he would go do something. Like he didn't like, hurt the child to spite me.
Sure.
But it was always, hey, you're throwing up too loud. Close the fucking door. I'm trying to sleep. I was out all night last night, and I got to work tomorrow.
Can you tell him to puking down a little, Ginjer?
Basically. Dude, they started calling me the puker at the hospital for a while, and they would give me a bucket and a blanket as soon as I came in. The guy that I was with actually worked at the hospital. So it was weird because, like, everybody knew him.
So you went from Fatty G.
Yeah.
To Pukey.
The puker. The puker. Yeah, it's great. That's got some great, good nicknames. And then I was Slim Shady later on. That's a little farther down the road. But yeah, so my kid was at like 6 months. I'm starting to do pills again. I'm going back to the doctor. I'm starting to sell them a little more because I would do this thing where 6 days out of the week, I would eat bare minimum Suboxone, like 2 to 4 milligrams of Suboxone, just to not be dope sick. Mm-hmm. And I feel kind of shitty, but like could function. And then I would get zooted one day out the week. I would do, 10 or 15 Oxy 30s all at once, and would feel that nothing that I liked to feel. That was really it. I was always, most people I felt like that I knew that were on drugs were trying to feel something, and I was trying to feel nothing. I wanted to absolutely be numb because it was just so overwhelming, all the different emotions that cycled through me because I hadn't done anything to heal.
Yeah.
But either way, so my kid's like 6 months old. I believe he had colic. I didn't sleep for like 2 nights. I get my son's father's mother to watch the kid for a little bit so I can go to sleep. I drop him off. I go to my friend's house, who's literally 2 doors down from mine. While I'm there, I take my oxys, and like my 10 oxys, and I even took part of a Xanax, which I almost never did because I wanted to sleep. I was just like so exhausted and frazzled. By the time I get to my house, like 15, 20 minutes later, again, it's only 2 doors down, I realized I didn't have a house key. I wasn't allowed to have a house key. So what I would do was we had a key in the back door because it didn't have like a deadbolt on the inside. So I would take the key out, lock it from the outside, and then would get in that way. I think it was a way to like keep me in the house, right? Like if you don't have the key, you have to keep the house locked, can't go anywhere, just stay your fucking ass home.
Just more control.
Yeah. So either way, so I get to the house and I realize I'm locked out. So I call my kid's dad. I'm like, hey, I'm locked out of the house. Can I come get your key? Because he works at the hospital. It's like 2 blocks over. It's like a mile, maybe a mile and a half from where we live. So yeah, you got to come now though, because I'm going into surgery. And I'm like, oh, dude, I really shouldn't drive, right? I'm not even in my car. I'm in my friend's car. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to go. I got to go. I can't sleep in the car. It's June in Florida. Like, I'll just go. I'll be fine. I take the side road instead of US 1 because I wanted to minimize my odds of an accident. And I hit a 16-year-old girl in the road walking a dog. I was so fucked up, I thought I hit a mailbox at first. And after I hit it, I'm like, I don't really remember. I remember going around the curve, and then I don't remember much. I remember feeling something and thinking, oh, did I hit a mailbox? And I'm looking around, trying to find the mailbox, and I see a dog, like, kind of limping down the road. So I was like, dude, I hit a dog? And I was like, well, I'm in someone else's car. Like, I fucked up. I should just go. And, like, I didn't really sit and think about it. It was, like, within half a second, that decision had been made, and I left. Then I'm driving down the road. I'm like, I was supposed to go back to the hospital. And while I'm driving down the road to the hospital, I'm like, why is the windshield broken? I can't find my cell phone. I don't know what happened to it at that point. I think it ended up like stuck up under like where the driver part is, like where your pedals and stuff come up. And I guess I was so messed up I couldn't see it. But I ended up going to my mom and dad's instead because I figured because of what was going on, I didn't want to go to the hospital and then I probably missed him because I couldn't call him and be like, hey, I'm downstairs and I can't find the damn phone. And I'm going to my parents' house and I'm like, fuck, I got to do something about this windshield. So I was going to have somebody come out and do like a little pop replace because it's not my car, I get out there and it's like a bad movie. It's like a perfectly clear day and they live in the middle of nowhere. And this is like before wireless internet and all you had dial-up connections and stuff. So we had satellite out there. We didn't have cable. There wasn't cable out there. And it's a perfect day. There's no reason for satellite to not work. It doesn't work. So I turn the TV on to watch satellite while I'm like trying to figure out what I'm going to do about this windshield. And it's the 5 o'clock news. And they're saying 5 or 5:30. I can't remember. It was one of those news. It's like a Friday. And they say it's a breaking news that a pedestrian had been hit in St. Augustine South. And I was like, damn, I live right by there. And then the witnesses come in and they start talking about what kind of car it was and that the girl was walking her dog and the person just left. And I was immediately like, oh my God, I fucking killed somebody. Like, what the fuck is wrong with me? I killed somebody. They said that she'd been life-flighted and that was all I knew. So I ended up calling a friend of mine whose father was a high-powered attorney in town at the time. It was like, hey, I need to talk to your dad. It's like super important. She puts him on the phone. And I basically tell him, hey, hypothetically speaking, I know the person that hit the pedestrian in St. Augustine South. And he's like, okay. And I think he already knew like what I was saying, right? And he goes, well, is that person at their parents' house who own a small business? Because that person might want to think about having anything having to do with that crime at that place because there's no accessory law in Florida, right? So, and that's my recollection of how he said it, right? Mind you, I'm all fucked up.
Sure.
So what I heard was, hey, you need to take the car and get it off their property so your parents aren't liable because of some stupid shit you did. So I take the car and I like dump it like a mile. I just dropped it up. We lived in the woods. Like I just drove down the road and the first hunting trail I saw, I just parked it and got rid because I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. I called my mom. I had my mom pick me up. She takes me to my kids to go get my son because my son's still with his grandmother, his other grandmother. pick him up. We go to my kid's dad's house, and like I can't sleep. I'm just super anxious. I'm looking at my child like, bro, I fucking ruined your life, and you're only 6 months old. Like I already ruined your life because I knew I'm not like the worst guilty conscience ever, right? Like I'm not the type of person who can. Don't ever commit a crime with me, bro, because if we hurt somebody, I'm telling on me for sure. I might not tell on you, but baby, I'm telling on me because the shit just sits on my heart, right? But I remember it was like the middle of the night. I'm okay. I'm like the middle of the night, like 2:30 in the morning. So I call my dad because he's up, and he's working his stores. And I tell him, hey, I did something really bad. I need to talk to you about it. So he goes, okay, meet me at my first store. So I get my friend, who's like a lifelong friend that lives two doors down from my kid's dad, to take me over there. I get to the store. And I'm just crying tears. I'm like stuttering, and I'm not even saying anything. Finally, we get to the truck, and he lights a cigarette. I'll never forget this. Does this have something to do with that car you've been driving? Yeah. He goes, okay. It's not stolen, is it? No. Okay. Did you hit something? No. Okay. Did you hit someone? Yes. And he goes, you goddamn kids are going to kill me. Because mind you, my brother had just got out of prison. And we had this whole oxy thing. And my parents knew I was struggling. Didn't really feel like it was their responsibility to do anything. And they didn't know what to really do. So he goes, you hit someone and you left. He's like, we're going to turn you in. I was like, yeah. So we go home. And at first, I tell my dad, don't tell mom. Don't tell anybody. First thing he does, he tells my mom tells my brother tells his girlfriend tells like 5 people. By the end of the day, St. Augustine, Florida is a small town. Almost everybody knew that I was the person that hit the pedestrian. And like, I mean, it just is what it is, right? But like the impending doom was weighing on me. We call an attorney. He basically says, hey, nobody knows anything. They don't even have an investigator assigned to the case. This is Saturday morning. This is the next morning, not even 24 hours later. He's like, she's in the hospital. Let me see if I can find anything out. But I think we're gonna turn you in this evening. Or today at noon, I think it was. It was like 8:30 in the morning I called him. That time comes and goes. I call him, and he's like, hey, I got caught up doing stuff. We're going to do it this evening, like 5 or 6 o'clock. That time comes and goes. Call him back. He goes, hey, they still don't have an investigator. They don't know anything. Let's do it Monday morning at noon. So between that point and that evening, my mom gets it in her head that if I don't go tell my kid's dad that I did this immediately, that she's going to do it. So I go over there and I tell him, and he x-rayed the girl because he worked in the hospital. Sure. So when she came in, he's like, dude, you hit a you did that? That was you? You know, he's like, I had to x-ray her. She's fucking hurt, dude. You fucked her up. I heard that she had, I think, 50 staples and stitches to her person, and then her foot was, like, twisted, which is part of what she needed the x-ray for. I believe she spent, like, 1 or 2 nights in the hospital and was released. Mm-hmm. But I have friends that know her and said that she struggled all throughout high school because of what I did to her. So either way, I tell my kid's dad, and then I was actually working for an addiction specialist at the time, and there was me and one other girl up front. So I go to the other girl and tell her, like, hey, I might not be into work Monday. Like, you might have to do it yourself. I had an accident, and I need to go, like, take care of it. And she's, oh, my God, that was you? We saw it on the news. And I was like, no, because I didn't want her to tell anybody. Sure. I wanted the opportunity to turn myself in. Her husband had like 3 strike felonies or something and was getting ready to go away. So he called the police before I could and made some type of deal that he got like a suspended sentence because he turned me in. So, and she took him to my kid's dad's house because that's the only place that she knew I lived, but it wasn't my actual address on my ID. I wasn't there. I was at my parents' with my son. Kid's dad's drunk, answers the door. He's like, calls me on speaker with the police from, hey, the cops are here. They want to know where the car is. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I told him what you said. And I click, fuck. I don't have the capacity, I don't have the bandwidth to have this conversation with you right now. It's like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, I haven't slept in, probably 3 days because I know I'm about to go to jail. And my dad kept watching the news because he's like, they might not give you a bond. They might wait to see if she dies or has horrible complications because of this. And if they do, you might sit there for a while because it'll be a new charge. It won't be the same charge as just leaving the scene of the accident.
So this is just piling.
Yeah,
Piling
I'm like 20
there.
years old, like 21, something like that at the time. And like emotionally, I'm probably like 16, So either way, the police come out. I go outside because I was hiding on the roof at first. They're like walking all over my property, my parents' property. So I finally go out there because I'm like, well, I'm going to turn myself in. It doesn't make sense to hide. It doesn't make sense. Like, let's just go and just deal with this. So we get out there, and the first thing I said was that I wanted an attorney, and they rolled up like 5 cars deep. And I'm like, dude, I've never been arrested. I have no priors for anything ever. So it was kind of like shock. Mm-hmm. I was like, do I deserve, am I a threat to fuck it? Because I didn't view myself, I was absolutely a threat to society, but I didn't view myself as that because it wasn't intentional, right? It was an accident. But either way, I kept saying, I want an attorney, and the lead investigator, I think his name was McGinnis, he goes, I want the car. He's like, if you give me the car, I'll let you turn yourself in at noon. I didn't know he needed the car to arrest me. That's why, because what he had was hearsay, right? Because I hadn't admitted anything. So I'm like, Dad, what do I do? Dad, what do I do? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, just give it to him. I was like, all right. Because, again, it didn't make sense to me. I was planning on turning myself in. It didn't make sense to not give you evidence if I was going to tell you it was me anyway. Mm-hmm. So I give him the car. They arrest me. And I was able to bond out immediately. I was on bond for 2 years. My parents and my grandmother. So while I was on bond, my disease got progressively worse. This is the point where, like, I went from being able to use, like, once a week and do Suboxone to now I'm like, well, I'm going to prison. Like, and that's the first thing my brother told me when we saw you. He's like, oh, yeah, you're going to prison. Like, you know how many people are in prison with kids? Because I was like, well, I got a kid and never been arrested. He goes, Ginjer, you hit a person and you left. You're going to prison. Like, there is no in between for you. You need to get ready. You need to start saving commissary money. Like, and I'm like,
the advice from the inmate.
Like, I'd never been in jail. I'd never done it. Like, even when they arrested me, I never hit an actual cell. I never even got dressed. I went in and immediately had bond. Yeah. Yep. Because we knew I was going. My parents, I'd already called somebody. But I had to deal with, dude, I'm a fucking terrible person. Like, what, even keeping in the mind that I didn't realize I hit her. I knew I hit a dog. Dude, I would want someone to get out for my dog. I love my pets. You know what I mean? So that shit still weighs on me because it's like, dude, all it would have taken was for me to do one right thing. All I needed to do was one right thing in not 30 seconds, and I couldn't fucking do it. And then it snowballed into all these other things that just weren't, they weren't the person who I had always been prior to the drugs and these circumstances. So either way, I get to the point where, like, I'm doing 900 milligrams, 1,000 milligrams of oxy a day to survive. And I was snorting them at first, and then after a while, like, you do this. You ever tried to snort 40, 50 oxys in a day, bro? It's hard on your nose, homie.
Man, that's just insane.
Yeah, so my friend introduced me to the needle. So I was like, oh, this is way more convenient. And then by, like, within a year, dude, a year and a half, I think it was, like, closer to a year. I was so bad. I was shooting up in my neck. I had track marks. I would save, like, orange juice jugs and fill them with a needle every time I used it. So by 2 or 3 days would go by, and I'd have 100 needles that I'm throwing out, into the trash. And my parents are, like, seeing them. And my dad was like, she's going to die, and I don't want to feel like I didn't try to do anything. So he and my grandmother both put up, like, $3,500, and they sent me to a treatment program. I did 30 days or like 28 days and then came home, and it was kind of like a loosey-goosey place. I'm not saying it was a bad place. It was just one of those, hey, we don't force you to do steps. We don't force you to do any work. You can just hang out and dry out. It's up to you.
So, meantime here, what's going on as far as the case goes?
It's just being continued. Being continued. The judge allowed me to go across the country on bond. My attorney, so I ended up getting an attorney that my brother had, who was Alexander Christini. He was actually the first attorney we called when we were going to call an attorney, but he didn't answer, and my brother hung up too quick to realize that he had, hey, if this is an emergency, call this number. So then we called a subsequent attorney, Terry Shoemaker, who was the attorney that said, hey, we'll turn you in Monday, right? So either way, so this, a year and a half that I'm on bond, Christini is my attorney. He goes, dude, I'm going to suppress the car. And he had got 17 felonies for my brother, all dropped with suppression because of the way it happened. So I was like, okay, cool. And I was not hoping to avoid jail or avoid a sentence. I was hoping to have more leniency and more bargaining room, because if you don't have the car, you don't have anything, because I didn't make any statements telling you that I did it, and there was no witness that could point me out. All you had was hearsay. Because I never even confirmed to my coworker. It was, she just knew, if you knew me at the time, like in the car I drove and the area I was in, it was super easy. Sure. And the amount of stress I was under when I saw her, it was easy to figure out what had happened.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So either way, that I think that too was part of why my parents were like, hey, let's send her to treatment, because like maybe it'll look better. Let's do something, right? Because doing nothing is not where it's at. It's getting way worse. So either way, right before I come back from treatment and nothing changes, I'm loaded within like a couple weeks. Everything's the same. I don't have a car. My parents don't want to take me to meetings. I'm cured because I went to treatment and I'm no longer on drugs.
Everything's fine.
Yeah, but I didn't do any step work at that point in time. I hadn't helped anyone other than myself. And I hadn't learned about like doing the next right thing. So I was like, well, I'm going to go. I even had one of the counselors in the treatment center tell me, and I think it was like a week before I left, and it kind of changed my perception, because I was scared. Like 10 days out, I was petrified, because I was like, dude, there's no more money for treatment for me. I was in there with a bunch of like rich kids and they had medical insurance and parents that like really cared and shit. So I was like, dude, this is like my only opportunity. So if I fuck it up, that's it. There's nothing after this for me other than a prison sentence, which is probably coming anyway, and it'd be a lot better. It'd be beneficial to me to get my shit straight before I go in there.
Sure.
But yeah, it was just a lot. It ended up to the point where my attorney, like I came home, I didn't do any work, I didn't do any steps, I didn't heal. The counselor had said, you have some chronic legitimate pain issues. I've got some issues with my neck. I've got a hip that's messed up, a leg that's shorter than the other, and then some stuff with my low back. And again, a lot of this is from trauma, having car accidents. Like my dad crashed his bread truck into a ditch witch when I was like 11, 12. I was trapped in the truck sideways with you know what a ditch witch is?
Yeah, so I mean, so you
so I've
have
got
all
like
this stuff
all
going
these
on.
physical things, and then I think the emotional trauma, I think it manifested physically from stress, right? Yep. So he's like, how are you going to manage your pain pill use? And I was like, I can manage it? I don't have to just like not do them. That sounds a lot better. That sounds, sign me up. So I go home with the idea that I'm going to manage it. And everyone's I'm the dope man by the time I go to treatment.
I'm like, how much you got, man? How many you sell?
Yeah, sure. By the time I go to treatment, before I went to treatment, I was hitting 12 doctors a month.
There's some cash.
There's days where I was snorting some pills. That's what I was doing. I would make enough cash to go to the doctor, to pay my little cell phone bill, maybe get something to eat, have enough money for pills tomorrow, and the whole system will repeat. Yeah, every week I had a doctor visit. Some days I have two in one day. But it just got so bad so quickly. But when I came home, all those people were like, and these are people I've known my whole life. Everybody I know, for the most part, is strung out on Oxycontin in this St. Augustine, Florida. And anybody I've hung out with, at least in the past few years, is, because that had slowly become my only social outlook, is when I went to go meet people for pills or go get pills for other people.
That was your outlet.
Yeah. So people, I don't have any money. I don't have any skill set. I don't have my tool set of sobriety stuff, So I'm like, I'm gonna make an educated decision. I'm just gonna go one doctor. And I went, and it was okay for like a week. And then after that, I was like, well, damn, I'm out because I sold them, and the money doesn't last. And, well, I did a few, and then the next thing I know, I was like, well, fuck, I can go to another doctor because I had everyone. So the way it worked with the pill mills was for everyone that got shut down, you could go hit 4 or 5 within 1 week because you filled in-house. So when you fill in-house and they close down, there's no record other than your pill bottle and your printout, whatever you had of every month going there, showing that you went. There's no one to call and say, well, yeah, So I would take it to a new doctor. They would see that it shut down. I give them my printout, my script history. They would fill. Normally what happens if the place is still open, they call and verify that no other doctors and no other pharmacies have called. So what I realized was if I use a different pharmacy for each doctor and their small pharmacies is not connected, nobody's picking up on the fact that I just filled yesterday. So I did go in with the same story, and it became this huge fucking racket for me to where it was just exhausting. Every day I'm in a different area.
That was work.
Yeah, that was my job. Someone coming to pick me up and take me to Tampa. I'll be back this afternoon,
Man, so that's just insane.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the insanity of it is the normalization. Everybody in my family was like, this is just what she's doing. Like, okay, it's just normal. This is normal for her. This is her new normality. Either way, my attorney, shortly before I was supposed to get sentenced, got promoted to county interim judge. In order for him to take the bench, he had to be done with all his cases.
Yeah, get him out.
I was the last one he had, baby. So, yeah, it went from and I'm not angry about it or anything, but this is just how it happened, is, hey, we're not going to suppress anymore. We're going to go ahead. They're offering you 2.5 years in prison. I think you should take it. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, my brother's been arrested how many times? He hadn't really done no prison time. Y'all sending me straight to prison? So I didn't want to take it. He ends up saying, well, hey, I'm going to pass you this other attorney, and you can make a plea to the court. And I thought what I was doing was a plea with a cap, where, hey, you can't go over 2.5 years, and we're going to present mitigating circumstances on why she deserves less, even though that's the recommendation. Dude, and I think I blame myself more than anything because I was not emotionally and mentally aware enough to be able to participate in my own defense, right? And my attorney's like, well, fuck, if you don't care, I'm getting paid either way, baby.
Man. We're going to speak for you. That's our job.
So we get to sentencing where I think it's going to be one thing and that he's going to present stuff. He's like, hey, where's your letter? So I'm like, what do you mean? What letter? He's like, yeah, you're supposed to present your mitigating circumstances on why you don't deserve 2.5 years. So I'm like, And I partied the night before. At this point, too, this is, my accident was 2009, so now we're in 2011. The doctor shopping is starting to come to an end. The DEA is starting to close everybody down. I got kicked out of 3 doctors in 1 week within like 4 days of me getting sentenced. I was kicked out of 3 doctors. So I was hurting,
Perfect time for court.
Yeah, but I had a friend that had owed me some pills and went to the doctor the night before, so we went out all night, and I did all the pills he owed me and kept a few just to take in with me. And because I was like, well, I'm going to prison already. I might as well try to go in comfortable. Because I just wasn't thinking, dude, you're going to give me 5 extra years if you catch me with, and you're going to take them. You know what I mean? So either way, I'm in court, and I'm like, I don't even remember what I said, but I remember her family got up there first, and her father told me what a horrible human being I was, and I felt that to my core. They told me that the dog ended up dying, like, right before court, which I felt like he had they said he had been a beloved member of the family for, like, a long time, so, like, and my frame of mind at the time was like, well, sounds like he had a really good long life. He died like 2 years later. How is this my fault? Nothing was my fault at that point in time. I felt like I was a victim of circumstance and that everybody should see that. Nobody else looked at it like that, and neither should they have. I created every situation that I found myself in for the most part.
We got to own it.
Yeah, so the judge sentences me to 3 years in prison, 2 years on house arrest, and she revoked my driver's license for life. So I go to prison, and prison is a new experience. I wake up at midnight. I was sentenced on Tuesday evening. They kicked my bunk Thursday morning, and they shipped me and one other person, even though they had other people being sentenced. And the girl that came with me, she's like, dude, I've never seen them ship like 2 people, especially with people waiting. Like, I've been waiting for 8 weeks. And she's like, why are you special? And I'm like, oh, no. And I found out my parents were like, hey, if she dies in there, we're going to sue you. My parents kept calling up there because they knew how sick I was. Sure. They realized I brought stuff in, right? So that morning I had like, I think I brought in like 40 or 50 Oxy 30s, which I did all in like the first day and a half. And then I had like 30 or 40 methadone 10s, and I ate them like the second day and then the day that they kicked my bunk. So... You know, like why? Because I knew I could. I was like, I got away with it in county jail. I ain't getting away with it in prison. They make you squat and cough, and they didn't do that in my county at that time. So I get to prison, and I puke on my bunk by midnight because I'm starting to go into withdrawal. And I went into kidney and liver failure. I was there. It was a Friday morning that I puked on my bunk. By Wednesday, I passed out in chow. Because I couldn't hold anything down. I was gray. People, I don't know what people thought I had. They definitely thought I had something they was going to catch through this stupidity. yeah. Everybody wanted a wide berth from the puker. But they ended up having to black box me, and the only reason why they even sent me was because after like 3 days, I started having seizures, and I've never had seizures before. They put me on the floor, and they couldn't get an IV. They stuck me 22 times trying to get an IV on me, but like I didn't have good veins to start, and then I'm dehydrated.
I was gonna say dehydrated.
And then I'd been shooting up in my neck, and like I tried to shoot up in my wrist before that, so I had some scar tissue. It was just a horrible situation. So they're like, we can't get a stick on you. We're just going to monitor you. So they watched me throw up on the floor for days. Yeah. Man. Finally, the doctor comes in on like Wednesday, and I pretend like I can't breathe because I'm starting to like cut in and out. My vision's getting weird. I was like, dude, I'm going to die. I'm going to fucking die. And he ends up turning the nurse because he's like, Ullman, all like super irritated that I'm even still alive. Like want medical attention, right? And he goes, call 911. I don't want her to die on my shift. And I was like, all right, that's fair. I can see that. But they black boxed me. I was in the hospital for like 4 days with a central line in my leg, and they were giving me Dilaudid and stuff for a couple days, so I think it helped ease it. Yeah. And I was released to general population after that. I had a bunch of different jobs. I worked in the kitchen. I was a VP orderly. I worked in the library. I did inside grounds. I was at Lowell, which is in Ocala, Florida, and at the time it was the largest women's state prison by population in the country, and it's the most notorious for sex crimes against inmates by staff. And you learn really quickly that like nobody's coming to like save you there. Like you were totally on your own. You couldn't get pads there. The whole thing was just insane. Man. But either way, I did my time. I ended up, hustling cigarettes for a while. And then when that hustle ran out, I did the pen pal thing because I felt like, dude, I'm about to go home on house arrest and go back to this toxic environment. And I'm abstinent the whole time I'm in prison. I'm not using any drugs. I'm not drinking. None of those things. But I'm not healing. I'm at the point where I can admit that my life was in shambles because of me and that I was not a victim, that I was basically the igniter of all my problems. Right. But I wasn't at a position to work through the trauma and to come out on the other side. I was just at the first step of admitting, right?
There you go.
So it was just so difficult to even prepare for my transition because we had no support within the prison. Like, I was wanting to go to, like, a halfway house or something after to not have to go back home, and there just wasn't anything for me.
Yeah, because you weren't getting that support at home.
Yeah.
So you were going from the fire right back into the frying pan, from frying pan right back into the fire.
Yeah, so I that was why I pen pal, because I was like, I need money to move out. Like, my parents live in the middle of nowhere. They're getting older. They don't have time to cart me around to take me to a job. So I pen paled. I walked out of prison with a little over 10 grand. And I went back to my parents for like 2 weeks while I waited for the check to come from Inmate Bank. And as soon as the check came, I went and got a house in the middle of town, and my probation officer bought me a bicycle so I could ride to work. I was riding 10 to 20 miles a day.
They're like the Wicked Witch, man.
Yeah, bro. I got called a faggot by some dude in a truck one day because I'm in like this. I worked in the kitchen at Sonny's for a while, and I'm in this like big jacket with a hood in the middle of winter on this pink bike, and I probably looked like a dude because I gained all this weight. You couldn't see my face. Oh man, good times, buddy. But yeah, so house arrest was a learning curve for me because I couldn't connect with I was allowed to go, but like if you don't have a ride there and you don't know anybody in the beginning, like how do you get somebody to come pick you up? It ended up to where I got poked in the kitchen and caught MRSA, and they gave me a shot of Dilaudid because they had to cut it out. And I had even told them, hey, I was an opiate addict. I've been sober, or off the pills for like 3 years, a little over 3 years because I was gone. They're like, it shouldn't affect you. It was a long time ago, and this is a different drug. We're only giving you one. They sent me home with some Percocets, and dude, I remember walking home from the hospital and thinking, like I'm walking with this big hole in my legs. I don't have a ride, right? And I didn't have money for an Uber. There wasn't even Ubers then, or a cab. But I remember just thinking, I would love some pills. And like everybody I knew was still in the game. So within like a few weeks of that situation, I was back up and running. And so I was released in 2013. By the summer of 2014, I had tried like harm reduction. I tried to do the methadone clinic, and I had a hard time getting there, and I metabolized quickly. So I would do the minimum dose, which was 30 milligrams, and I go dose at like 6 in the morning. By 10 a.m., I signed up for school. I did cosmetology because the state would pay for it, and I knew I needed some type of skill or training because I had none, and something where as a felon, nobody cares that you're a felon. By the time the summer came around, they were going to take my grant to go to school, and I was like almost done. And I was going to the clinic in the morning, and by 10 a.m. I was nodding out, standing up, not using anything other than the methadone they gave me. And then by 7:30 at night, I'd be in withdrawals. Wow. So methadone was never really a good option for me, even though it got me off pills for a little bit. But then I would try to taper off quickly, and then would relapse on pills. So by the time they say, hey, we're taking your grant, I'm like, I got nothing to live for at this point. Like, I had a friend that had introduced me to allowing men to finance my addiction, is a pretty way to put it.
Gotcha.
And that shit just ate at my soul. Right? I was like, I can't do this like this. And my birthday is 2 days after Christmas. My first day of withdrawal was my birthday. And like we're in like August going into September. And I'm like, dude, I'm not doing another holiday loaded. I can't do it. So I made a plan. And I was like, dude, I'm going to shoot myself in the backyard in the head if I can't get sober before Christmas. I wrote Ellen, I wrote Dr. Phil, and I wrote Intervention. Intervention gets 10,000 letters a day. The fact that they saw my letter was a statistical anomaly. The fact that they were interested, and I wrote them. Most people, their family writes.
Sure.
My family didn't believe I could be saved. They didn't want to invest any more time, energy, money into anything for me. So I pretended to be my family.
Writing on your behalf. Yeah.
Right. So Intervention, I talked with them for like 3 months. They finally come out. It's interesting. I was going to shoot myself after my niece's birthday, which is December 16th, but before Christmas, because I didn't want my niece to be thinking about me shooting myself right before her birthday, and I didn't want to do another Christmas loaded. My intervention was on my niece's birthday. It just so happened that way, because I hadn't told anybody I was going to shoot myself in the head, right? So it was totally a God thing.
Yes, it was.
They sent me to treatment. I did like 90 days in treatment, and then I was gifted another 90 days in sober living in California. And I thank God every day, even though I understand that it's like a shock value show. Had they not come, I would be dead. And people ask me all the time, oh, with that out there? Because, like, I'm really ashamed of my episode. Like, I'm shooting up in my neck, I'm whoring around, and that they really wanted that footage. Then it was interesting, too, because I met other addicts that had been through intervention while I was getting sober and while I was in treatment, and they all said intervention gave me money to use because I was boring because I didn't have enough money to use. And I was like, well, they never did that for me. It was more like, hey, Ginjer, you said you're about to get sick. You don't have any money. What are you going to do? Right? And that's something I kind of...
in your face, man.
Right. But I think it was more interesting to the viewer to see the lengths I would go to not have to go through that physical withdrawal, that physical illness.
It's physical, it's emotional, man. It's all of that.
Spiritual. Yeah. So either way, while I was in this treatment center, it was like a PHP program, which means that like you're in treatment, but you go do things like AA or NA or whatever your ism is. They take you to a meeting for it, and then you work with others. You do volunteer work. You know, you go. They're trying to, as soon as you're physically stable, reintegrate you into life before they actually send you out.
To society.
Into the world.
That's just...
Because of their program, I was able to connect with the people in the rooms in that area, and those people let me kick and scream and just show up and say whatever to get it off my chest, as long as they knew I was working the steps while I was doing that.
You were doing the work.
Yeah.
You weren't just going through the motions, man.
Yeah, and I had a great sponsor. She'd actually, she was drunk and killed her best friend by accident in a car accident. So I felt really like she understood what I was going through and like where I was at, whereas a lot of other people couldn't.
Yeah, you had that connection. And that's just it too, man, because I know a lot of people that I deal with that talk about these different things, and as far as their interactions, what works, what doesn't work. And they'll ask me all the time stuff like that, what works? It's like, it doesn't matter what works for them or works for them. It's matter what works for you.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, man. So, I mean, it's a hell of a road, man. Yeah. It really is. And when it tears at you, I mean, you nailed too physically, emotionally, spiritually. And the thing is, man, you did this basically with just you and your support, even like starting way back again from the beginning of this. From 15 years old, each step got a little more intense.
Yeah.
Each one got a little more lonely because
progressive
you didn't.
Disease.
Yeah, and that's just it. So, I mean, all these different things that you hit on, man, I still love that trauma, the tree of trauma, man, because it just shows a pattern, and it's not just you. Yeah. How this stuff goes. And, I mean, there's so much more, that to catch up on, man. There's so much more that you have that we need to talk about. And, I would, we were talking before about the shows as far as coming on and stuff like that, because people need to hear more of your story, man.
I'll come back,
and,
man. Let me know.
You do, because it's an inspiration that addiction and all these things make you feel alone. But in your case, you were alone.
Yeah.
I mean, you were freaking alone from the get-go, and there was no support. There was no physical support, family support, spiritual support. I mean, you did have some. I know you said that.
Yeah, no.
But, I mean, on the majority of Ginjer, that was all you.
So you actually really just touched on something that I felt was very important. When I used to say all the time in the rooms, like once I really started to get it, I was like, dude, if I am different, then I am alone. If this program won't work for me, that makes me different. And if I'm going to be different, I'm going to be alone, I'm dead. Yeah. Because me being alone leads me to a needle in my neck. Like,
and another thing is talking about it, or sometimes just shoving it under the rug. I've talked to people who have done that, they're like, well, we have so-and-so, a family member who's got a problem. But, we don't talk about that in public. Or, so-and-so's got a drinking problem, drug problem. But we don't talk about that outside of these walls.
Further the
it's
stigma.
Like, you know what? It's not taboo. We're dealing with all this stuff. It's by not talking about it, you just put another drink in his hand. By not talking about it, you just put another needle in her arm.
Yeah.
So, man, I thank you so much for hitting on some of these things that were obviously so painful. But you powered right through it, man, because you've been doing this. I mean, I just met you. But seeing that interview you did, that's one of the things I picked up on was you owned it, and, I tell you what, it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to go on this journey. And there's so much more, though. Like I said, there's so much more that we got to,
Yeah.
just focus on, because you're helping so many people, because there's a lot of people that are like connecting to certain things that you're saying that do feel alone. It's like, well, wait a minute. I felt like she did, and no one else listened to me. But you're proof that addiction is not a death sentence, and you can get through all this. So
right. Have you ever heard the saying of, like, I forgot, and I'm gonna like loosely translate it, but it's something to the effect of, people think the opposite of addiction is abstinence and sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. Right? Because how many people start off their journey with drugs or alcohol wanting to feel a connection to something, someone,
Yep.
and then you lose every day that you dive more and more and more into your vice. You're withdrawing from your job, your family, your friends, your society, your hobbies. So it's like, if I'm not connected, right, and I'm not doing the work, whatever that looks like, whether it's 12-step, I did 12-step for a long time. And then I remember being 3 years sober in the rooms, wanting to kill myself because I have chronic pain, and everyone was telling me, you can't take pain meds, you can't smoke marijuana. I thank God my best friend in sobriety, she has over 20 years in sobriety. She's 15 years older than me, but she's still my best friend to this day. She goes, Ginjer, you can do anything you want sobriety as long as you're willing to pay the consequence, the potential consequence. So I started to look at things different, and I ended up getting like the medical marijuana card. So I tell people now, I am not sober in the sense of I am totally abstinent, but I have found something that works for me, and I am using podcasting and the platforms to share my story as my way to connect to people, because every single day there's 2 or 3 people that reach out to me because they saw the intervention, they saw the interview with Ian, they saw the interview with the Hopeaholics, and they want to know, is your life better? What was the turning point for you?
Yep.
The biggest thing for me was the connection to the community, and then the 4th and 5th step to see the patterns. And I learned so much about myself in the 12-step community that I never would have been able to honestly look at without having that mirror held up to me and having somebody that understood, not a therapist that I paid, somebody that showed up for me on their own heart to give back, and that has been there and be like, oh, that's it? That's all you did? Let me tell you what I did. To kind of take the weight off of it, but to still say, all right, so you don't have to feel as guilty, but you need to look at that as, how does that make you feel, and sit with that feeling, and know that the feelings that you have, you put those on other people, whether you knew it or not, while you were doing what you were doing.
Exactly. And like I always say, you got to own it. Once you own it, take that first step. And, it's been an amazing journey, man. And like I said,
it gets better too.
I know we got to come back and get some more on
Let's
this.
do it.
But I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And you are helping a lot of people, because by you coming out, as painful as it is, you are saving lives. You are sharing your story. You're sharing hope and everything like that. So, Ginjer, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we are going to go back on again.
Let's
Besides
do it.
that, with a last name like Wolf, it's meant to be. Now that's going to be good. Oh, man, I tell you what, hats off to Ginjer Wulff for, just this amazing story. And like I said, there's a lot more. So we are going to connect again in the future. So please, until then, just remember that addiction, it is not a death sentence, man. And, just reach out. Help is there as long as you ask for it. So appreciate you coming on My Fight Our War.
Thank you.
And please, if you know someone who's looking for any type, if you think there's a problem, there's a problem. So please check us out at My Fight Our War. You can check us out on YouTube at Manny Vitale, My Fight Our War. And until next time, thank you so much.